Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 42 of the Hot Path Show.
My name's Johnny.
And today I am, of course, joined in by. Welcome in, Danny. How's it going?
It's going amazing.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, so in today's episode, first, just want to say right off the bat, we're going to be pre-recording this episode, so it still will be going live up on the YouTube channel, and hopefully when it's going live, I should be able to hang out in the chat, so if anybody has any questions or anything, feel free to post them away, and yeah, I'll be there answering them. But yeah, otherwise, the main topic of today's episode is as some of you know, I have this project Dots Survivors, which is a game that's going to be available for free on Steam. And I'm also launching it alongside an asset store product, which basically gives you access to the full project files along with some supplemental video and documentation resources to just kind of explain how the whole code architecture works in the project, how you can extend the project to make it your own and everything. So I think it's going to be a really great learning resource. But anyways, I'm going to be talking a little bit about, I have some interesting things in there that I'd like to get Danny's opinion on about, how I'm going about doing these things. And if there's some certain things in there that, he might do differently. So we'll get into that. So how does that sound?
I mean, pretty good. We dug into it a little last time, so I'm excited to see which topics you have in mind.
Yeah. I got three kind of main topics, and we'll see if we can get to all those in the time that we have today. But I think we should be pretty fine here. But yeah, other than that, we can go ahead and start getting into some things. So we can start with a little bit of a warm-up topic here. So, Danny, I know. You know that I recently got the PlayStation 5, and we added each other on the PlayStation Network. I didn't even know that you had a PS5 at all, so I just kind of wanted to
it's right over there.
Talk to you about the PS5 a little bit. How long have you had it? What have you been playing on it?
I mean, I've had it for. When did it come out? Because I had it not the year it came out, but like
it came out in 2020, like towards the end of 2020, and it was pretty difficult to get your hands on. I remember for quite a while.
Yes, so I got it like half a year later. Okay. But the way that I got it was kind of interesting because I obviously, as many others, couldn't get it for a while. It was really sold out, that console. But when there's this what's it called, like we say it's a big store, but it's not really that big. At least when you consider like Walmart and all the other weird sizes you guys have of the stores,
like a Costco or something.
Yeah. Imagine like a mini-sized version of a Costco, like a very small version, like smaller than Target. Anyways, that size of store, still considered one of the bigger stores in Denmark. It's called Bilka. They do this thing where on Facebook they will have like raffles. So you can like just put your name down, and if you win the raffle, so to say, and in this case, I think it was just whoever got there first. So it wasn't that much of a raffle, if anything. Then you got a number, and that number meant that all you had to do was show up, and then you were allowed to buy a PlayStation 5. And specifically a PlayStation 5 bundle that included the game as well.
Right, of course.
So that they could get a little more profit out of it.
Yeah.
It was still sold, at market value, so it was still cheap, all things considered. But it meant that I had to. It wasn't the Bilka that was close to me. I had to go quite a distance just to get one PlayStation. But when I got it, I actually managed to get 3 of the raffles. They just weren't in the same city. But my friends also wanted it, and I had to meet up in person because it was connected to my Facebook.
Okay.
So it meant that I had to go around 3 separate towns in Denmark. I'll actually try to do a quick screen share of where those are located.
Yeah,
I'm kind of curious what you consider a long trip or a small trip, because I considered quite a far trip, at least as far as like Denmark standards.
Were you kind of taking the train around for the most part?
It was, I think it was actually mostly bus. No, there was one part of it that was train. But it was all public transportation. That's the default in Denmark.
Of course.
There you go. So this is the map. I lived up in Aalborg, and I think the first PlayStation was actually in Aalborg. I think it was like right down here somewhere, and I lived over here. So that's not
Okay.
too bad.
Yeah, in the same city, you know. Yeah, you
Yeah,
can
same
get
city.
over
I
there
think it
pretty
took
easy.
me like 30 minutes by bus because of like having to wait and stuff. It's not too bad. Now the worst bit was then that I had to take 10 minutes in here, and then it was like 2 hours to get all the way down to Viborg. And then I could pick up a PlayStation like out here somewhere. So I had to take a tiny bus within the city just to get to the location that I could pick up a PlayStation. And then back
And
to
then did you
Viborg.
have to basically take this whole trip like all the way back with the PlayStation with you?
Mm-hmm. So I got a PlayStation there. Luckily, I did actually take the first PlayStation and put it home, but the two others were, I got here, then I had to take all the trip all the way to Holstebro from Viborg, and then a round trip back to Viborg and up to Aalborg again.
So you had to do that basically whole trip back home with two PlayStations.
With two PlayStations. I have this picture of me waiting like an hour for the last bus that day with two PlayStations in hand.
You're like,
Also
yes, I'm
that I
so
could-
excited to play these PlayStations when I get home in 2.5 hours.
Also, I could hand them off to my friends because that's why I did it in the first place, because I already got one, right? That was the first of the three.
So did your friends not even come with you? You're just like by yourself?
Nope, that was all by myself.
Ridiculous.
I thought I would get a nice trip out of it. They did also pay me a little extra for it. But I mean, it definitely wasn't worth the trip. If that, like, I think it was mostly just to get a trip out of it. I did it.
Yeah, just to go travel
Yeah.
around the country a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. So that's how I got the PlayStation 5, and I think it was like 6 months after it came out.
Dang, that's hilarious. It's always
Yeah.
funny, like when like the things that you have to do when the console's like super in demand. Like I remember when shortly after the Nintendo Switch came out, like it was probably I'd say about 6 months or so after it came out. It was still pretty challenging to get. But I remember like I just really wanted to get one because whenever there was some game coming out, and I was just like calling a bunch of different places, and then it was like everyone was still sold out, and then like finally found one that was like a little bit of a drive away. I'm like, all right, like let me just go straight there. They got a couple in stock, and ended up locking one down. So yeah.
Yeah. When did you get your first PlayStation 5? Is this your first one, or did
This
you...
is the first time I've had a PlayStation 5. It's actually the first time I've had a new PlayStation console since the PlayStation 4 originally launched 11 years ago.
Is it 11 years ago that?
Yep.
Oh,
November 2013.
Damn.
So crazy, right?
that feels unnatural. That.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it
Now we
was- it
both
was-
feel old.
I know. Yeah, it was one of those things like I kind of had it like a goal in mind that like when I moved into this new place that I was like that was when I would like finally allow myself to get a PS5. But then like kind of around the time that I moved in here, it's like we start hearing rumors about the PS5 Pro console, and I'm like, all right, I've already waited this long. Like, let me just wait it out a little bit more, and then yeah. But yeah,
I mean,
so
now you finally got it. Did you ever try the like triggers before? Like I think
no,
that's one of the things that makes it so special.
I
that
was
console.
so impressed by the triggers. Yeah, they felt really good. Yeah, playing like Astrobot, it was like really cool how like you can like you can really make it feel like a gun trigger almost. Like you can pull it back a little bit, and then it has that like actual click through portion. It's really cool.
I mean, you definitely need to play Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. It shows off that so well because
Awesome.
like every gun has their own feel to it, and like
Oh, how cool.
it has like multi-click stages to it. So you can like the first part of it is like a small amount of shooting, and then if you hold it down, like there's a little click, then you can do like a powered up version of that
Oh,
shooting.
okay. I like that.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's
Yeah, I'm looking forward to playing that one. I know I kind of want to replay through the PS4 Ratchet and Clank before Rift
yeah.
Apart, just to replay through that one again.
I mean,
'Cause I know
technically
it's
in the
been-
chronology, that game is really old because it's the first game.
Yeah, it's kind of like a remake, but also retelling. Like they completely changed a bunch of things.
It's a retelling of the original, which I suppose they've already done twice at that point because they had the original game and then they had, I think, a PSP version of the game.
I know they
and so-
had on PS3 and Vita, they basically did like a remaster re-release of the original
yeah, okay.
trilogy.
So that's what I was thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then they did the 2016 version.
Yeah. So yeah, I want to replay through the 2016 version and then get into Rift Apart. Have you messed around with the like the PlayStation Plus Extra thing?
Plus extra? What's the extra?
So it's basically like they have like multiple tiers on their like PSN subscription now. So
Yes.
it's the middle tier, and you basically have access to like a massive library of games. So I think it's like $15 a month if you want to pay it monthly, but then, of course, if you want to do like a full year or whatever, it's cheaper. But you basically have access to like a bunch of PS4 and PS5 games. And so I know Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart is one of them. They also have like The Last of Us Part 1 and like a bunch of other like pretty big titles in there.
Oh, damn. Yeah,
but
I
yeah,
only
I
have
was
a cheaper version of the PS Plus.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I was just kind of scrolling through and I was like, dang, there's like a lot of really good stuff in here. And it's like, way more cost effective for me to do it that way than like pay for a bunch of, $60 and $70 games.
Yeah, I noticed that as well. Yeah. Especially if you just got a PS5, then that's the way to go.
Yeah, 100%. And I think actually I might have seen that they're starting a Black Friday sale tomorrow from when we're recording this, the day that this goes live, where I think there's some discounts on some of the PSN tiers. So I'll be looking into that.
Interesting. Yeah, I also noticed that they recently added to that whole ordeal Sly. So one can play Sly through it, which is pretty cool.
One of your favorites.
Exactly. Man, I have played that game so much.
Oh yeah. Any other standout games for you on PS5 that you have played?
I recently bought Astrobot, the game that you get with the PlayStation, but Astrobot, the actual fully fledged game that they made after, based on that game.
Yeah.
And oh my god, is it so well done?
Nominated for Game of the Year at Jeff Keighley's Game Awards.
Yeah, I saw. Yeah, it's fucking amazing. It's really one of the best platformers of the year.
It looks great. I've heard nothing but good things about it, and I really enjoyed just the packed-in version. Got the platinum trophy in it. So.
Yes, I mean even the packed-in version is a great collectathon that really like if you like completing games, that's the perfect game to do it because you can do it pretty quickly. But there's some fun mechanics in there, and like the movement feels really good. And like it really shows off the controller well.
Yeah, and I think even just the whole kind of like artifacts system they have set up is just like a really cool look into like PlayStation history. For the people who aren't familiar, basically there are kind of some like special hidden collectibles that are maybe like a little bit more kind of off the main path, where when you get them, you get like a piece of PlayStation hardware, like going all the way back to the original PS1. And they have like all kinds of weird, obscure accessories. Like, like they have like the PlayStation mouse in there.
Yeah, and I mean, you also just go around collecting characters from games. I think even in that version of the game, you go around collecting characters, and when you come back, you actually see all the different characters that you've collected so far. Which is really cool.
Yeah, it is really cool. Was there something else I was going to say on that? I don't know. Anyways, shout out to Astrobot. Really, really cool game. Yeah.
Also, like they must have been really data oriented in that game, because there's the amount of particle simulation that interacts with the physics of the game. Like I'm sure it's so stable. Like it's really, really fucking stable.
Oh yeah.
The physics in that game. I'm sure they optimized the hell out of that.
No, I was noticing. I mean, there's just like, again, it's just a short little couple of hour long packed in game, but I mean, they really put a whole lot of effort and care into it. Like, there's a bunch of like really cool, ornate, like like you say, particle effects, or like some crazy like technical art effect happening that only happens once or twice in the game, but they still like clearly spent a lot of time like making this really cool and interesting, even though it only happens in this one little section of the game.
Yeah, I really want to see a deep dive of how they did some of their mechanics in the game, because I'm sure they're really utilizing the fact that it's the PS5 hardware and it has multiple chips that can be used. Like it has a dedicated audio chip that is like
right
a fairly strong RTX style graphics card. It has a lot of compute on it, is my main point. So you can like ray trace audio normally, but you can also do other stuff. It doesn't have to be audio. And I'm pretty sure they're utilizing some of that for the particles. That's my assumption at the very least. It's very cool. It's actually interesting because it seems to be that this company that is making Astrobot has been doing it for a while. The newly released, the one that is awarded or is nominated for an award, is the 5th game of Astrobot that they have made.
Really? So there's that one. There's the packed-in one. I know there's the VR one. Was there a second VR one as well?
I don't know if there was a second one, but there was also with the Playroom camera. For the PS4.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
And then what was the last one? There's because I know it's 5 Astrobot. So it's made by Team Asobi. They made 5 games. So it's called the Playroom VR, Astrobot Rescue Mission, which was another VR.
That was the VR, yeah.
And then it's Astro Playroom, which is the one you've been playing, and then Astrobot is the new one. But so the Playroom was also both Astrobot games.
Yeah, this looks like okay. Yeah, I think so. This was the launch game. This is a PS4 launch game.
Yes.
Oh yeah, so this is back when they were Japan Studio still.
I mean, I feel like you can still feel the Japanese vibe to the games.
Well, yeah. So Team Asobi, they spun off from Japan Studio because I believe Japan Studio closed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And something really cool that they also do in the actual games is that the way that the worlds are structured is that you get a world and then you complete the levels in the world, and then the final level has like a special character that you unlock that becomes the final level. And that final level is based all around that very character that you unlocked. I won't name any one of them as to not spoil you, but it's really cool to see that they like have implemented game mechanics from those games that they have characters you collect.
Awesome. I'm very much looking forward to that, getting into that one.
Yeah, especially if you like platformers. It's a really good platformer.
Yeah. Platformers are always just like good, fun, chill games, or it's just like you just have a smile on your face the whole time when you're playing it,
Yeah, exactly. And you can like oftentimes just like sit down, play a level, and then go on your merry way. It's not a big commitment to play a platformer, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And and I think kind of going back to what you're saying about just like taking advantage of the hardware, it definitely really uses the SSD super well. Like just anytime that you load into a level, I mean, you just kind of like jump through, one of the portal things, and you have this like, effect for like half a second, and then boom, you're in the next level.
I mean, that's what feels so great about the PS5 is that like pretty much every game that was made for the console is just instant loading. You don't really feel the loading screen. You don't even feel the like classic trope of, oh, this hallway is very turny, rowdy, or like this elevator. You're in this elevator for a while, aren't you? Or this spaceship is
Right.
moving around for flying through space for some reason for quite a while.
Yeah.
While the disc is spinning up, you don't notice that in this. It's also kind of funny because I got with Astrobot, for instance. I have the digital version of the PS5. No, not the digital, the non-digital. So I actually can put in a CD. And when you get a CD, it seems to just be a license key at this point because
Yeah.
as soon as you pop it in, it just asks you to download the whole game. I don't know how much is actually on the discs anymore at this point. That's a relic of the past, it feels.
Yeah, I know.
That's so weird to me.
Yeah, it's insane. Yeah, also, again, like you're saying, the games that were made specifically for the PlayStation 5, like they can also just kind of take advantage of the fact that it's an APU architecture. So basically the CPU and GPU are both on the same chip. So I think there's a lot of interesting advantages of that as well for, again, bespoke games for the PlayStation 5.
Yeah. I mean, that console really has some really nice thought put into it.
Yeah, they've done a good job, and they're obviously been very, very successful with it. So
yes.
Shout out to Sony.
It's kind of weird that we are at a point where there's basically only two console manufacturers, because Microsoft very
Sony and
much went on the back.
Nintendo.
Yeah. Because Microsoft totally failed with the Xbox for a while there.
Yeah, they've unfortunately been dropping the ball.
Yeah. At least there's those two, but they are not really in any way competing with each other.
Sony and Nintendo, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're almost playing a different game, but
yeah. I mean, literally in a way, right? I guess they now overlap in Astrobot sense versus Mario.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, those sort of compete.
The weird thing with Nintendo is they always have been like a half a generation off. Like Sony and Microsoft, they would always come out with their releases kind of like around the same time. But like Nintendo has always been like, like halfway through the generation is when they announce their next thing. So like, the new Nintendo Switch is supposed to be revealed, I think, sometime next year.
It's kind of fun that way. I always love the fact that you can expect Nintendo releases to be in the middle of Xbox, PlayStation releases, and just Xbox and Sony going against each other.
Yeah.
So, which I guess is not really going to be the case anymore. I don't know if we will see a new Xbox.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they end up doing with it, because I mean, they're definitely still going to be keeping making games because they just bought Activision for $87 billion. So
yes, that still seems crazy to me. Isn't
insane?
I thought I heard somewhere that there's a stat that now Microsoft is earning more money from their PlayStation games than they are from their Xbox games.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. so dumb.
Yeah. All right. Well, we can go ahead and move on to a couple of announcements here. So for the first announcement, this is a really big one. We're going to do a quick sponsored segment because the Unity Asset Store is hosting their annual Black Friday sale, where you can save 50% off on over 300 of the most popular assets. And they also have a bunch of flash deals going on where you can save up to 70% off on certain assets for a limited time. So real quickly, let me just go through some of my favorite assets that are part of the sale. So one of the really great ones that I really like is Agents Navigation. So we have the Agents Navigation base package as well as the Crowds expansion. The base package kind of gives you all the basic stuff that you need for implementing all kinds of pathfinding using Unity dots and ECS. But the awesome thing about this package is that it is fully compatible with non-ECS projects. So you can still use game objects with it. Now it is really cool because it still uses ECS on the back end, so you still get high performance even in a game objects-based project. Now, Agents Navigation Crowds expands that to give you flow field pathfinding. So this is when you have, very large numbers of enemies where you want to have them, path to a specific point on the map. And this pairs really well with another great ECS-based asset, which is the Rukonka ECS animation system. I really like this animation system because it is pretty easy to use and set up. You can basically just use a lot of the built-in Unity animation mechanism features. However, it gives you the ability to actually render ECS entities with full animation support, which is really, really nice. Another great one here is A-Line. This one gives you basically access to debug as well as runtime lines and primitive shapes. It is much better than just kind of the standard Unity's debug.draw line. It really just gives you a lot more flexibility and visual options to change and modify. But the really amazing thing in terms of my view is that it's fully compatible with ECS, jobs, and bursts and all that. So you can basically render all kinds of these debug gizmos from a ECS, job, and burst contexts, which is extremely helpful for doing any type of visual debugging inside of Unity when you're using dots and ECS. Another great asset this part of the sale is the dots traffic city. Now this one's actually a little bit more of a complete project where it actually kind of gives you a full example of how to basically create a fully functional city with characters moving around and different cars that basically kind of follow the rules of the road. So it's a really interesting project to kind of pick through and can be used as a great base if you're trying to make any type of, say, city builder project or something along those lines. But of course, there's more than just dot stuff. You have the classic ones like the Odin Inspector, which allows you to create tools very easily using the Unity editor. Of course, there's a lot of polygon, low poly assets from Cinti Studios that are available. Here's a really cool one that I recently picked up, the Polygon Apocalypse Low Poly 3D. And I'm just a huge fan of these Cinti assets. I think, even though there are low poly style, there is really a whole lot of effort and detail that goes into these different assets, and you can make some really, really cool things with them. And yeah, you're going to be seeing something that I'm making with this very, very soon, actually. And of course, we can have, visual effects here, as well as different sound effects and any type of music audio tracks. So there's a lot of really great stuff on the asset store. And don't forget to check the flash deals where, again, you can get a bunch of different assets for 70% off for a limited time. Then they'll drop down to 60% off. And then after that, for the remainder of the sale, they'll be 50% off. So you can still get some really good discounts, even if you do miss the 70% off flash deal period. So yeah, go check out the Unity Asset Store Black Friday sale. I will have some links to that sale as well as some of my favorite assets down in the description of this video. And thank you very much to the Unity Asset Store for sponsoring this portion of the Hot Path Show. Also, do want to remind you all that CodeMonkey has his full dots I guess it's the first 7.5 hours about of his dots course is available for everybody on YouTube. I'll have a link to that down in the description, and you can also get his full course through a link in the description as well. Danny, have you checked out any of the big course by CodeMonkey yet?
I only skimmed through it. He nicely gave me a key to look at it. No, I haven't actually gone really through it yet, other than seeing that the content looked pretty okay.
Yeah, I think it's again really good introduction into dots and ECS. I know probably most people who are watching this are still fairly familiar with dots and ECS, but I do think it is a good. Really good introduction if you don't have any experience with any of that stuff. He does a good job of, kind of giving you some information on the theory, as well as kind of like learning some of the quirks about, having the authoring workflow and the runtime workflow, and yeah, just kind of some of the quirks of ECS. So I think it's a good course, and would recommend at least checking out the free tutorial course. And if you like that, go ahead and check out the full paid version that has more just more content in it, basically.
I'm still so surprised that he prefers white theme.
I know. I know. Yeah, he likes the light mode for his code editor and the Unity editor as well. Yeah, I think that just kind of goes with his personality. He's not the typical coder that is kind of the person who's up till 3 a.m. with who needs the dark mode because it's like super dark out. He's a early riser. Wake up early, get things done kind of guy. So.
Yes, that is true. That is true.
All right. So with that, we can move on to another thing created by some more friends of ours. Someone to shout out the Desktop Cat Cafe. So shout out to our friends Sam and Walter. They've been working on this game here, and they just revealed it. So it's available on Steam to wishlist. Kind of a cool little concept because it basically plays on your desktop, just like as you're, doing work or whatever. Like it basically has this, little cafe that you kind of like manage and create and just kind of like runs in the background as you're going about your day doing things. So it's, one of these nice little fun, cozy games. So, Danny, what do you think of the Desktop Cat Cafe?
I mean, I loved it when I saw it. I obviously have a cat myself. I very much approve of this concept. It's like a mini Sims, but with cats on your desktop at all time.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the idea, again, just like having it kind of constantly there. Like it's not something that you need to be like super hardcore focusing on, like dedicate a bunch of time to. Like you can just kind of, again, have it running in the background, let it do its thing, click around, interact with it when you want to.
I'm also amazed that it's all made in Unity.
I know. Yeah.
I think
all made in Unity.
Yeah. I mean, achieving that effect in Unity must not have been an easy task. I'm talking to you, Walter.
Yeah. No, I'm sure there's a lot of really interesting things that they did to get this all working and have it like, cut out around like the edge of these 3D models and everything. Some pretty cool stuff going on.
Yeah.
Are you going to install this on all the computers at the Unity office now?
Oh yeah, totally. 100%. I'm sure IT would be very happy. I mean, it sort of reminds me of like Wallpaper Engine. I think Wallpaper Engine was also written with Unity, or at the very least, you can run Unity-made applications inside of Wallpaper Engine, which also just is a program that always runs as mini game engine in the background. So it must be getting more and more common, but it's still cool to see this.
Yeah, no, I think it's a super smart little concept and looking forward to it. So yeah, go wishlist that on Steam. Also, Survivors. Steam.
Also, something I was impressed by, they have it translated, that Steam page in
oh yeah
most languages.
You were talking about that, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Survivors only in English right now. Only in English.
I mean, and we have a Swede on the show, and we have a Dane on the show.
I know.
Yeah.
That's what happens, I guess, when you take 2 minutes to set up this Steam page.
Yeah, I suppose there's not even a trailer.
Yeah, I don't even have a trailer going right now. I am going to be getting a trailer going soon. I'm waiting on getting some music created for the game, and I think when I have the music, then it would kind of make sense to kind of make the trailer off of that. But yeah.
Yes, true.
So yeah, this is my game Survivors. You can also wishlist this on Steam as of right now. This again will be available as a free game coming out this December, again alongside a Unity Asset Store product where it has basically all the source project files, so all the scripts, artwork, audio, everything basically with the game. And alongside that, I'm going to be launching a bunch of learning resources, basically, teaching people kind of how I set up the architecture in the game. And, if you want to extend the project, make it your own, how you can kind of do that. So yeah, I think it's going to be a really good learning resource for people to kind of, show what goes into creating a full game project that's released on Steam. So, of course, going to be highlighting a lot of the best practices of Unity Dots and ECS, but also showcasing some of the places where things are still a little bit messy in the current version of Unity Dots. Where you have to,
Are you saying there are still messy parts in Dots?
no, I mean, no, just because, with Unity 6, it doesn't have that full, entities for all connection yet. So there's kind of some weird things that you need to kind of bridge the gap with between Dots and regular Unity. So yeah, I think this will be a good kind of a resource. Again, people can, learn from for the time being until, Danny, you finish all your, ECS for all connection in the Unity versions to come.
I will see about that.
So yeah, go check out Dots Survivors, available to wish list on Steam. Yeah, and then with that, you just want to remind you all that you can support us over on Patreon as well as through YouTube memberships. We do have some fun bonuses there. So recently I put up a video kind of going over the code of the Odin Solitaire game that I recently created. Then I'll also be putting up a Q&A thread for the month of November where you can just kind of ask me any questions about, any kind of development stuff or just kind of random, just whatever, ask me anything type stuff. So that's, again, available through Patreon as well as YouTube memberships over there. So yeah, let's go ahead and get into a quick little topic of discussion here, and then we can move into that main portion of the show where I'm going to be, again, kind of going over some things in my Dot Survivors project and asking Danny just kind of his thoughts on, what I'm doing, if there's anything that he might do differently in any of that. But first, I want to talk a little bit about another data-oriented kind of thing that we bring up from time to time. This is Raylib. So, Danny, did you see this? They had this 5.5 version release. Did you see this at all?
I have not seen it at all. No.
All right. Well, this is a pretty substantial release here. So yeah, it looks like 1 year after Raylib 5.0 releases, they have this 5.5. So it's the next big revision of the library. And also, wow, it's been 11 years since Raylib 1.0. So same age as the PS4.
Damn.
So yeah, they have just kind of some of the highlights here. So it actually is a pretty substantial release. So there is this Raylib pre-configured Windows package. So they say this new Raylib portable and self-contained Windows package for Raylib 5.5. It comes with one big addition: support for C code building for web platform with one single mouse click. So yeah, basically they said for the past 10 years, pre-configured Raylib Windows package allowed to edit simple C projects on Notepad++ and easily compile Windows executables with an automatic script. So the new release adds the possibility to basically take the same C projects and deploy them to a web platform with a single click. So they say this new addition greatly simplifies C to WebAssembly project building for new users. The Raylib Windows installer package can be downloaded here. And actually, I saw a video that the Raylib YouTube channel put out where they basically showed them downloading Raylib, installing it onto a machine, and then deploying just kind of like a generic window to a web platform in 1 minute.
Damn. Okay, that's pretty good. I mean, yeah. Yeah, no, that's good.
Yeah, yeah. So also have the new Raylib project creator tool, just to, I guess, kind of help you get up and running with new Raylib projects. Platform backend supported RGFW. I think this is kind of like some web platform backend. Another platform backend.
I mean, I'm just reading the retro console.
Yeah,
supported section.
I was going to be jumping over to that here. So yeah, they have retro console platforms supported. So Dreamcast, Nintendo 64, PlayStation Portable, PlayStation Vita, and PlayStation 4.
Yeah,
Cool.
that is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I have seen tweets from people making Dreamcast projects or N64 projects.
Yeah,
using Raylib. It's sort of weird that you can, because it's a fairly modern API, obviously.
Right. Yeah.
So supporting it on such old platforms is something else.
Yeah, I think it's really cool when people do that, and I think it's just like, it's like, why would you want to develop for some platform that's like, so old? But I think that like kind of gives you just kind of like some good information about like, hardware architecture and like how to just deploy to different platforms in general. I think on a lot of modern platforms, a lot of the stuff is just kind of like hidden away just because it's like, the architectures get so complex that you really kind of like need some custom tools that like kind of do a lot of that stuff for you. And so I think with a lot of these older platforms, like things were just kind of like a lot simpler, and just kind of like being able to kind of go through the challenge of deploying to some of these older platforms, just kind of give you as a developer a little bit more insight into the process of just pushing things to different platforms in general, and kind of some of the considerations that you have to make. Do you kind of agree with that statement?
100%. No, it's yeah.
Awesome. But yeah, so yeah, cool to see that there's the retro console support there. GPU skinning support
I think
as well.
also one thing I want to add is also that like the fact that it works on so old platforms also goes to show that Raylib is fairly well optimized. Because otherwise it wouldn't have been able to run in the first place. I think that is also a good testament to the performance of Raylib.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, we're not going to be running an Unreal app on the Nintendo 64.
No. Someone has jokingly made a version of Unity that does work on what's this, an Atari, an old Atari machine.
Wait, what?
Like an Atari. Which version is it? Atari. What is it called? What was the popular Atari machine?
There's like the 2600.
I think it was that one.
Yeah, I mean, there was like a bunch of them. Unfortunately not like super familiar, but the 2600, and then they have, just a bunch of like random numbers.
So someone did get it build Unity building to that version. Obviously, wow. It was a very, it basically is using Unity just as a level editor platform sort of situation more than anything, because and I think they could run a bit of C#, but it was mostly like bursted C#. But it was still pretty cool to see. Like it felt wrong.
It felt wrong. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyways, also with Raylib, new GPU skinning support. So yeah, we can do more stuff with 3D, have some new RayMath C++ operators. And then they go into a bunch of other improvements on some things here. So yeah, this is a quite large update, and as far as kind of some of the new features go. So yeah, shout out Raylib. I think it's really cool that, again, this is just has you know, compatibility with like many different languages. We've kind of showcased on this show how you can use it with Odin, but of course it's originally like a C-based kind of thing, so you can use C, C++, and a ton of other languages as well that are all compatible with Raylib. So yeah, just a really cool, just kind of generic framework, again, for doing a lot of the kind of graphic stuff within game engines, but then also I believe you can also kind of handle inputs. You can have like controller inputs. Like they have just kind of like some easy ways for you to take in input from different sources and run it. So yeah, just good stuff overall. Any final words of wisdom on Raylib?
No. I mean, I personally love Raylib for any, like, especially smaller 2D projects. I think Raylib is definitely the way to go. And also just like quickly prototyping something and seeing it work. That's very nice.
Yeah. It I think it kind of gets you back to that spot where if you just want to draw a pixel on the screen, like you can just have some like easy functions for you to do that, where you just say, hey, draw this pixel in this location in this color. And of course, it scales up from there, where you can start drawing kind of more complex things and, draw textures to the screen and, yeah, all kinds of good stuff in there. So, yeah, shout out to Raylib. Okay. So yeah, I think with that, we can move into the main portion of the show where, again, I'm going to be sharing some things with you all, and yeah, just kind of getting Danny's thoughts on, we do a little roast my code here. How about that?
It's shite.
Okay, so yeah, here's the project. I'll just go ahead and play it real quick so people can kind of see what's going on. So basically, we play as this little spaceman here, and then we have all these aliens who are coming out and attacking us, and we, of course, have these attacks that we can kind of send out into the world. We can also level up our attacks as well as get new attacks. So, for example, here's kind of the buzzsaw attack. So it shoots out different buzzsaws, and yeah, just kind of a fun little clone of the Vampire Survivors type game here. And yeah, so I mean, that's just kind of like a real basic overview about what this game is all about. So yeah, the first thing that I wanted to talk about is something that's I've found a little bit difficult to do sometimes with Unity Dots, which is kind of just general scene management. So just kind of like loading in between, in this case, I have like kind of like a title scene where, you kind of like select your character and what level you want to load into. And then, that kind of flows into the main gameplay scene. Typically going that way has been, pretty easy, but then kind of going back to the main title screen is where things get a little bit weird, because again, ECS is kind of separate from, the whole scene workflow. So when you kind of, if I'm understanding correctly, when you go back into the main title scene, that all those entities that you maybe instantiated or whatever, like they still kind of like exist in the ECS world.
Yes.
And so yeah, a lot of times I think especially if I have like maybe some systems where I had, say, like disabled the system, when you go back into the main title screen, that system is still kind of disabled, and so you kind of have to keep track of what are the systems that you disabled, and now I have to re-enable them because maybe they just do some like one single initialization step. So it's I kind of have to re-enable those. So is that just kind of like me describing that problem? Does that kind of like resonate with you? Like you kind of follow, I guess.
I mean,
my thinking.
I definitely see the problem, but it also depends on how you choose to set things up. Because a lot of the time, what we suggest doing is making sure that your systems are like they can entirely work based on the data that is present, and they don't like try to disable themselves. For instance, like you don't use the state.enabled, for instance. Like what's it called? There's also for that reason the on start running and on stop running.
Right. Yeah.
To sort of help you do initialization when something starts and to do the destruction after. But that as long as a certain component is present that happens to live in a scene, then that system should be able to do all the initialization for itself. And as soon as it stops being present, that component from the scene, because the subscene unloaded, then it should also kill everything.
Yeah.
So if you had like a spawn system, for instance, that spawn system should ideally also be the one that destroys all the entities that it created as a result of, let's say, the prefab being unloaded that came from that subscene. Because the prefab would generally be contained in a subscene, and therefore, as soon as you unload your subscene, so would that entity. It's just anything that you spawn from the prefab that wouldn't normally.
Okay. So actually, yeah, that kind of gets into another thing that I want to touch on in a little bit. So I kind of want to remember to bring that up. But
Yes.
So kind of going back to the scene management stuff in general. One issue that I have in particular with what you're suggesting about having kind of initialization logic run in the on start running, on stop running, is that I like to do something a little bit silly, we'll say, as far as how I go about pausing the game. So I usually take the entire simulation system group and initialization system group and set the enabled flags on those to false anytime that I want to essentially pause the game. So if the player presses escape, or they go into the level up screen, or it goes into the game over screen or whatever, I basically just disable those entire system groups, so the system stop updating, and then the game effectively pauses at that point. The issue with that is that when I resume playing the game, then any on system start running event methods basically get called again. So I think I had done that with this game start system here. I think I had tried using the on system start running
Yes.
for this here. And it basically just, if I hit escape and then, pause the game and hit escape again to resume the game, then it would, spawn a new player for the first time and do some of this other initialization logic. So unfortunately, that wasn't a adequate solution with, what I'm doing for pausing the game. So you'll see that I'm just kind of, setting the enabled property to false on here. And then, I'll show, how I kind of chose to resume that. But yeah, so I guess kind of what are your thoughts on that as far as me kind of going about implementing pausing game in that sense, and that issue that it kind of arises with the on start running, on stop running.
I mean, it's really interesting in the sense that I don't for instance, for the presentation that we did at Unite, we have the game running in the presentation. The way that the game is only supposed to start as soon as we hit that slide, and it's also supposed to stop as soon as we exit that slide. The way that we implemented that is not far away from what you're doing here. We are, I suppose the main difference is that instead of using enabled to enable disable it, what we are doing is we are making sure that once a certain component is there, only then should the game start running. If that component is not there, then the system shouldn't run at all. Which sort of gets in the way of that. Now, as far as like the main issue we had there as well, and that's sort of similar to you, is the initialization. So what we do is as soon as we are not running anymore, then we reset them. And I think it's in that sense it's sort of difficult to model by just saying on stop and on start. I do think that it is the right path, and I haven't actually looked into trying to fix pausing. Like, how do you then do pausing without triggering those artifacts? Because you sort of still want your game to be able to have an easy way to pause everything that is in simulation, or at the very least, maybe have a system group that all of your gameplay systems live in, and then be able to disable that temporarily so that you can pause the game essentially. And I think for that reason, it's fairly easy to conclude that enabled, like doing it this way, is a somewhat easy to do way of achieving it, but also you then have the problem of having to manually go in and make sure to re-enable those systems, because like game start system to then be set up again, so you can have a proper initialization when you need that initialization.
Yeah. I guess I suppose that another way that we could go about this is maybe again using the on start running workflow, but have like a require for update for like a specific initialization tag, and then at the end of that kind of initialization logic, I'll remove that tag from the whatever entity.
Yeah, I mean it in that sense it's not that different from the enabledness, because when you the way that on start running and on stop running works is that it will just check if a function that is called should start running, I think it is, whether that returns true or not, and then it's only triggered once, and as long as it keeps being triggered, the first time it's not triggered anymore is also when on stop running is the case. Now that function should run system. Actually, could you try typing it out in your system here? It should be part of so base dot little b, the keyword base.
I don't have any autocomplete on here.
Why don't you have autocomplete?
Because that's for noobs. All right.
Yeah. Should start running.
Should run system.
Yeah. Then look at the implementation of it. Yeah, should run system, of course. Yeah. And what you can see here is it checks all the required queries, then it checks all of the required for matching, which is the attribute. And then go down. No, it doesn't. I was almost sure that it would also check the enable state. Okay, so you would need a tag component. I suppose the reason that we don't do that is that the enabledness of a system is also something you can trigger and turn on and off from the system hierarchy window. Which is also for the same reason that we tend to not recommend people use that Boolean, because if they use that Boolean then and then decide to enable it inside of the system view, then all of a sudden you can't expect your behavior to be correct. Because if your game depends on the behavior that you have of the enabledness of a system, and you then start turning it off and on in the system hierarchy view, then you're in for bad day.
Sure. So you're basically just saying it's not suggested to kind of like overuse it and kind of rely on that, because that enabled flag can be set from elsewhere and it could potentially lead to unexpected behavior.
Yeah, exactly.
That makes sense.
In any case, so let's try to see how what you're doing here. So game start, we enabled it, we disabled it. Actually, yeah. Why? So why are you in this case, for instance, not using on start running?
So again, that was kind of the issue that I saw when I just did a quick implementation of that is again, because when I'd pause the game and disable the main system groups and I would resume the game, that this initialization logic would run again. But again, I suppose that probably it seems like the better solution would to have require for update, initialize game start tag or whatever. Then all this could be run in on start running, and then at the end we just remove that tag component, and then basically I can count on any time that I load into a scene that an entity with that initialization tag would exist.
I think it's even simpler than that. I think there should just be a component called game running, or a singleton entity that is called game running. At the start of your game, you make sure to create that, and then you make sure that this game start system requires that game start running to exist. Only then is this system active. Now, if you go to pause the game using the enabledness, what we just learned is that the enabledness actually doesn't stop it. So it wouldn't re-trigger on start running if you were to use enabled to disable it.
That's what was happening. I have the require for update of essentially this game properties, which only exists when the game is kind of running, I think is the
okay. In that case, let's quickly go in and see what determines should start running. Not should start running. What determines the on start running, and we can to find that go into world.cs. Or is it world unmanaged? I think it might be world unmanaged.cs. Yes, and then go down to update.
Unmanaged update.
Update. Yep, that's the one. And then, okay. So if you look at line 840, so if it's enabled and you should start running, and then you can notice it has this previously enabledness, and that's what determines whether or not it should call on start running. So you're right that it does actually use the enable state to determine that. I suppose what you can do instead is you can just have your own enabled Boolean instead, and then do an early out using that.
That's fair.
That would get around it.
Okay.
Because I think that would still make it a lot simpler, because you would just have an on start running that would do the initialization once and only as long as the game is running, and then you can still pause your game independently by having another Boolean that disables all your runtime systems. But it wouldn't be an issue with
does my Boolean, how does my Boolean get reset? Like when I say go back to the main menu and then want to come back into the game a second time?
That's a good question. So I suppose, well, for one thing, all your default system, like the game start running system, would then stop running because all of a sudden you don't have the game running anymore. I think once that happens, is also, I think that the on stop running is the one that should then make sure to disable it, or re-enable the game.
But wouldn't the on stop running get triggered when I pause the game?
No, because you would have to enable. You would have to create a separate Boolean that is your pausing. The pausing is not based on the presence of a component, because that presence would be there always. Game running just means that the game is currently in play. It doesn't the game running singleton should not still be present while you can pause. I guess it should be called something else then. Not the game is active or is in play. Anyways, okay. you would have that singleton be present, and then what's it called? When you didn't want to pause, you would check a Boolean, and that Boolean would be in the system group that all the systems that should stop running is part of. That means that all your initialization code and initialization and destruction code is just part of being in an active game, and the things that then pause is separate to that.
Gotcha. So you're kind of suggesting that, I basically would create a system group with all the systems that I want to be paused, and then the kind of systems that run some of that initialization logic essentially just sit outside of that. And then
Yes.
I'm really just kind of pausing that one specific system group.
Yes, because I think that would get away from having to manage all this. You're essentially a state machine. Because what you currently have is you have a lot of state in. I suppose because your game is still fairly small, all things considered, it isn't too much to manage all the different enabledness you have in every single system. But as your game progresses, the more things that can start and stop a system from running, the harder it's going to be to diagnose what stopped it from running. Especially because like the presence and not presence of a component is very easy to check for. You have our component view for it, you have the hierarchy, you have debug logging, you have plenty of ways of checking that. You don't really have a nice way to tell what triggered and enabled
Sure. Yeah.
thing to change. So
Okay. Good to know for that.
and also the thing that, like by using a game running state, then you can also just have that be part of a subscene, and as soon as you unload that subscene, that component is gone.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
Anyways, go on.
So yeah. And then as far as like viewing the actual kind of scene changes and stuff like that. So I think this is basically what I'm doing here. So so what I'm doing for like destroying the entities is right now I just kind of have basically all the entities in my game have this kind of destroy entity flag, and I'm just kind of setting the destroy entity flag to true on there to basically just get rid of all the entities immediately. You were kind of suggesting that maybe I can kind of keep track of this through when I'm doing some of that kind of instantiation logic.
Try saying that again.
So as far as like, because when I go back to the main menu, I want to like destroy all the entities that I had kind of spawned in the game that aren't like part of the subscene.
Yes.
You'd kind of mentioned that the prefab is part of the subscene, and there might be a way that when that prefab or when that subscene gets unloaded, that and that prefab goes away, that I can kind of more automatically kind of destroy those entities. Like, would that be something kind of maybe through a linked entity group, or how exactly would that work?
So the way that I would implement it is I would create an entity query that specifically looks for an entity that is your prefab, and then I would add that to your system start running require for update, because then at that point what you have is on start running is only going to be called at that one time that your scene is loaded, and that as soon as the on stop running is called is the time at which the scene unloaded, because that prefab is gone. And now that is the case, like the unstop running is called, is also the point at which you should look for any instantiated version of that entity query and destroy it. So you just like it should end up with being a fairly small system, because all it's doing is it's creating two entity queries, one of which is the one that has one of which is the prefab where it says with all prefab, and the other one is the one with none prefab, right? And you just require for update when the prefab is there, on stop running, call entity manager, destroy entity, passing in the entity query for all the non-prefab versions.
Wait, and so do I need to like, I guess, how do I structure those entity queries? Like, do I need to do something specific for every prefab type that I have, or what exactly?
I mean, that entirely depends on how your prefabs are set up. If there's like a common structure that works for the prefabs, I think it's you can just generalize the entity query to say that as soon as one prefab is like, if all the prefabs live in the same scene, it's fine to say that when one of the prefabs are gone, then all of the entities should just also be gone. So like, if you don't have to do it for every single prefab archetype. All you have to do is make sure that you find a subset that you're okay destroying all of. So like, you wouldn't destroy all entities that have a local transform, in case you have some entities that you might need to carry over that have a local transform. But you would say, hey, destroy all players when I don't anymore see the player prefab. And you might even be okay saying, when I don't see a player prefab, destroy all players and enemies. And
so I could still maybe do something like this, where I'm looking for everything with this destroy entity flag, but instead of like doing this just kind of manually within a mono behavior here inside my UI stuff, like just kind of have a system that does this, that says, hey, when this particular prefab is unloaded, we'll set this destroy entity flag to true.
Yeah, exactly. So it becomes like self-contained. Like, ideally, every feature in your game maintains itself. So you don't end up with a lot of coupling in your code.
Makes sense. Yeah.
I mean, that's just like, again, it's not to say that anything is wrong in here, neither with the enabledness we talked about earlier, or
right.
this approach here. It's more of this is probably the way that I would do it in an ideal scenario, given a bigger team size, where more people might be changing the code, and therefore it becomes more important to set up some clear boundaries on where each feature lives.
Right. Yeah. No, it makes sense. And then, just on the game authoring, I think, how I have this enabled set to false here, I think this is actually the only system where I'm manually disabling the update in there. So I only have to keep track of that one system that I need to re-enable basically when I go back to the main menu. So it's not really that much, but it still seems a little bit messy. And I've definitely had some projects where I had like multiple of these systems that I'm disabling, and I have to go back and re-enable them all. So there's just kind of a little bit of a code smell that I kind of wanted to run by you on that.
Yeah. I mean, I would never personally do the enabled equals false. I would always opt for a having a component. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Start running.
Yeah, I think I have some ideas of some ways that I could implement something a little bit better like that. So I'll probably try and get that to switch over to that. So yeah, that was kind of what I wanted to talk about, mostly as far as scene changing. I know actually, if you read the documentation on scene stuff, there's a lot of stuff in there actually, as far as loading scenes in and out and sub scenes and streaming them, and a lot of it kind of was going over my head a little bit. So just kind of wanted to just talk to you about just doing just some basic scene changing. Like, I don't need anything crazy fancy, but there still is kind of it's not necessarily the most straightforward thing.
I totally agree with you. It's also not an API that I personally use that much. It's it used to be the Dutch pipeline team, it was called, that worked on those features. Now they are migrated into our team. It's actually most of our team is now who used to be the Dutch pipeline team. But I mean, those people are all, really great, but it also means that they were working on the civilization system, and I don't really have that much of a clue. I think it mostly comes down to just checking the presence of whether components are there, as far as like scenes, like using the scenes, as far as like actually loading them. That's where the story gets a little more complicated. And yeah, I don't think I would be a good authority actually to talk about that subject, just because it's not something that I work on.
That's fair. But yeah, no, I kind of, like what you're saying in general about sticking with more or less the, data-oriented patterns of, the system is just always running, and, whenever the presence of a particular component exists, then it, runs that logic. It's just kind of operating on the data that it's given.
Yeah. And I mean, generally speaking, a scene is loaded if the data from the scene is present all of a sudden.
Yeah, that totally makes sense to me. So yeah, the next thing that I actually wanted to talk about was a little bit of prefab management. So I'm doing a couple different things as far as the prefab management goes. So I kind of have like a couple different levels of things that we can kind of talk about. So I think the most like basic version of this is just kind of how I'm doing the player prefab. So basically I just kind of have, like, if we go back over to Unity on this game entity, you'll see that I have kind of some of these entity prefabs, and then I have just a direct reference to this player entity here. So if we actually go into the game authoring, you'll see so there's, I guess, these game properties. I just have a player entity prefab. And then, in the actual, this initialization system that we're just talking about here, in here, we initialize or instantiate the player entity prefab, which gives us this new player entity. And then basically from here, I'm kind of like taking some of that data that we set in maybe the title screen, because I have like a little bit of a character selection screen where the characters kind of have some different properties associated with them. And then I basically, like set the material for the player, add whatever components are necessary, just kind of doing stuff like that. So, I mean, that's just kind of like a pretty simple and straightforward kind of common way of kind of creating something like that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
So yeah, that's just kind of like, basic what I'm doing for the player. Do you have any comments on that for now, or that's just kind of all fine? I mean, that's just kind of the most basic one that I have.
No, I'm actually mostly excited to see that for the most part you are, like, for instance, new player entity. I'm noticing you're not adding components afterwards. You've set up that correctly to begin with, and then you start using get component, which is exactly what I want to see. Like, I am noticing on line 180 and 181, you are creating an entity just to then add a buffer to it. Meanwhile, you could have used a new stack alloc.
Of course.
Stack alloc and then pass in stat modifier. But I'll let that one slide. Yeah. Otherwise, I mean, all the like register mesh stuff and everything looks pretty kosher there to me.
Cool. Sounds good to me.
You're even using a world update allocator in line 195.
Oh, I'm using world update allocator everywhere.
That's good.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, now where things start to get a little bit squirrely is in this game. I have a number of different attacks, and the kind of properties for those attacks are stored within an entity. So in this case, I have basically a bunch of different kind of attack prefabs for each of the different attack types I have. So there's a total of 12 prefabs. So it's, something that's kind of still, manageable directly. It's not like, an overwhelming number of things. But, it's starting to kind of grow in number a little bit here. And then so we can kind of look at these, and they basically just kind of have some kind of properties associated with them, and really the main thing is it has this reference to the scriptable object, which has a lot of the more specific properties about time, hit points, and the actual prefab that attack spawns for the kind of like in-world thing. So there's kind of the entity for, say, the plasma blaster, and that kind of keep tracks of the timers of when it should spawn the new attacks. And then the actual in-world attacks are going to be like a separate prefab that has the collider on them, and kind of has the sound effects and graphical effects and all that stuff that are like actually happening within the world. So that's just kind of the basic setup of the attacks. So again, going back to the game entity here, I just kind of have this list or collection of the different kind of like base core attack prefabs of those. So what I'm doing here is essentially, this
What
is
is that? Wait. Dictionary, string, and
oh yeah.
well,
yeah. So yeah, the attack entity prefab. So this is kind of a lookup of basically I can kind of key into this collection. I'll show
With
you
the
why
string.
I'm using the string for now.
Okay. Yeah. I'm a little suspicious by seeing them.
Because
Not only is it a string, it's a managed string, and it's a managed dictionary, and
yeah. Basically the idea with this is like anytime that the player gets a new attack, we want to say look into this dictionary, get the prefab from it, and then kind of like instantiate the prefab basically as a child of the player. And so I kind of wanted to have some way to essentially look up the a prefab. So I kind of have these managed game properties here, and unfortunately, using the
does that mean that your code is filled with a bunch of strings everywhere?
I wouldn't say a bunch.
No, but like, is there any reason that isn't just an array and then an enum?
My thing with the enum is that now I would just basically have to create like enum values for each of the attack types, I guess, right?
Sure. Okay. I can see that.
What I originally had is for the key, I had the scriptable object.
Oh.
So like if we go to this, like this here, so they have this scriptable object. I was kind of using that as the key. Because I can easily get a reference to the scriptable object like that. I'm like the scriptable object has all the stuff in like the level up screen, like has like the icon and all that stuff, right? The scriptable object as the key was working fine as I was testing, except when I went to create a build. For some reason, when I went to create a build, there was a weird mismatch of the like the GUID of the scriptable object in like when it got loaded initially into the dictionary versus what it would be when I was like looking it up later. It was really weird.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah.
So what I ended up doing is I said, okay, I'm just
gonna fix it.
Stop messing with this, and then I just say scriptable object, and then I just do .name of the attack, and I'm using that as the key. I'm like, all right, whatever, just be done with this.
Yeah. What you could also have done probably is use the instance ID, because the instance ID should.
I was using the instance ID as well. I was fighting with this for like a whole day, and it was just a weird mismatch. Also, something cool just showed up, and I'll be right back. Talk to the people.
Hello, everyone. What? Okay, now I'm very curious about what he's gonna show. Is it a package? It's probably a package. it would be very odd if you got pizza at this time, right? Let's say. So I am noticing that the message there is ice cream sandwich. So maybe that's it. Welcome back.
Okay.
What did you get? And is it an ice cream sandwich?
This is very exciting. What was that? About the
And
ice cream
what
sandwich?
did you get? And is it an ice cream sandwich? Because that's what I was noticing on the screen.
Oh yeah. The ice cream sandwich are the health pickups in my
I
game.
see.
So this actually goes back to something that we're talking about a little bit earlier today. Oh, this is so cool.
Oh my god, that's incredibly cool.
You got the 30th anniversary DualSense Edge controller here.
Yeah, you can't really, to my understanding, I haven't been able to see that in the EU.
Yeah, well, they had there was like a pre-order date, and you basically had to be on there like at the time of the drop,
Yeah.
basically. So yeah, that's really cool.
So that's very cool.
Classic PS1 colors and everything. So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get back to this mess. So yeah, that's basically what I'm doing there. And you'll see that yeah, so then I'm doing a just a get entity to essentially initialize all those prefabs, just kind of going through that list and then just doing get entity on them to basically just initialize them. And then I think down in kind of my initialization system, yeah, I'm doing a for each query for them, looking for the with all prefab entity query options include prefab, and then we just basically try and add to that managed game or that lookup they were just talking about. Basically putting in the string as the key and the entity prefab as the value. So,
Okay.
That's kind of what I'm doing. And then again, when I want to do that level up logic, again, all the buttons kind of are populated with content from the scriptable object. So then it's, fairly easy to say, okay, I have the name of that, let me go look that up. I can get the prefab and then instantiate that prefab as a child of the player so that the player now has that attack. So a little bit messy, but what do you think of that?
I think the attack system itself is exactly how I would have done it as well. Like the like ability to quickly make up an attack and like customize it and like build up the attack that you want and have the different attack archetypes, so to say, is probably fairly similar to what
and it works really well with like leveling up the attacks and everything. So I'm super happy with that side.
And it's actually a similar thing that we did for the what's it called, the box in the connecting the dots.
Okay.
All of those are built up of like you make up the book and then you add that to a giant prefab that stores all of them. So it's sort of similar to this. I think to me it's just the way that you cache the using a string, like a strings to me, and pretty much anyone on our team is a giant ghost mill. We avoid strings like the plague. It
was pretty much my last resort.
and I know a lot of people are like, especially if they come from like a more web background, are annoyed by the fact that it's so hard to use a string because there are points at which it makes sense to use a string. Like for instance, you have a dialogue based game, you need strings for that. But I think for us, stuff like this is a code smell because it's like it is a runtime cost, and it does mean that all the places that now has to get that using the name lookup is going to have to do the pretty much slowest approach possible, which is to hash up that string and then look it up in the dictionary and find the correct in this index, which probably is not that big of a performance cost in your case, but
Yeah. Because again, the places that I'm using it is pretty much localized to the level up screen, which is just kind of
Yeah,
the
and that
UI.
doesn't
You
happen that
click
often.
on it, and it just does it once. It's not like
Because the big problem would have been if you were to do that, like say every frame.
right. Yeah,
If
for like
like
the enemies or
every enemy
whatever.
were looking up the, or like if you have multiple players looking up their attacks every frame based on the dictionary, that would have been bad.
Yeah.
But I think this is fine. I think like what I would have done in a bigger project is probably I would have set it up so because you're right, enums, the annoying thing about enums is that then you would have to match the enum to the scriptable objects that you have already created, and that can get even more messy, and that's even worse in a way, especially from like a user workflow perspective.
Right.
What I would have done is I would have made a quick little tool that creates the enum for you based on the scriptable.
Okay.
A
little code generation, maybe.
Little code generation, yes, exactly. Not source generator, actually, because it would have to be based on Unity assets. But no, I would have generated some source code to help
Well,
get around.
that is a great transition because I might end up doing that for the enemies because the enemies are done in a slightly different way. The thing with the enemies is I don't actually have all the enemy prefabs created yet, so I may actually end up doing this before I do that. But you can see, like, if we go to like the materials for all the aliens, like you can see that there's like a ton of different, we have a whole bunch of different alien types here. I think there's a total of like 45 as far as like some of the different colorways and different enemy types go. So yeah, have quite a bit of enemy variety, which I'm quite happy with so far. If we go over into prefabs, you can see, okay, we got attacks, items, UI, visual effects. Okay, no enemies. Where are the enemies? Oh, I have these under the resources prefabs enemies. Why could that be?
So I did notice something earlier, which is that in your Baker, you had this call to resources.load all. Is this related by any chance?
Yeah, this is.
Okay. Because I did have if it wouldn't come up, I would have asked, because we don't generally recommend. Generally in Dutch, we don't recommend using resources.load at all, much less to use it in a Baker. So I'm kind of curious to see what this will be about.
Yeah. So anyways, yeah, I am doing the enum approach here, which I know is a little bit hypocritical of me because I said, oh, I don't want to use enum for attacks when I have 12 of those, and I'm using enums for enemies where I have 45.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can see that I manually went in here and
Created
typed
every
out
single
all the different.
Wait, okay. Which one did you do first though? Did you?
What do you mean?
So did the enum here come up before the what's it called, attacks, or was it the other way around? Like, because here, if you did this first and then created the attack setup, then at least it would make sense going like, oh, I don't want it now. I want the name approach in a dictionary.
I don't remember.
Because obviously most of them I would have imagined the two systems did come up at the same time roughly.
Yeah, they kind of did. Yeah.
Because you can't really have an attack without the enemy. You can't have an enemy without.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think the kind of the attacks started growing first before kind of the enemy variety did.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's that.
Anyways, yeah. Okay. So you have an enum and it has all the different permutations.
Correct. And then the reason that I wanted to use the enemy enums is because I actually am using these for other things. So for example, if we go to scriptable objects and look at the stages. So I have these like basically enemy spawn waves, and I can say what are the enemy types that are present in this wave? And then I just have this drop down of all the enemy types, and I can kind of, select which aliens are part of that. Like, does that kind of check out as far as, what kind of why I'm using the enum for that?
I mean, technically, you could have used a scriptable object there, right? So
so the aliens themselves don't have scriptable objects.
Oh, okay.
I don't think.
I suppose there's no different. Like, there's no reason you couldn't have pointed to a prefab either.
But is that kind of like now like the game object prefab though?
I suppose it would be, yeah. So I suppose getting the reference would then be harder.
Yeah, that does
yeah.
kind of like, why, again, things started kind of getting messy a little bit in that direction where,
Yes.
that's kind of one of the things that I mentioned about how, there isn't that clear connection of the, dot side of things with the regular Unity game object side of things quite yet.
Yeah, and then that is why for this sort of thing, it wouldn't be the first time that I've generated enums based on the structure of either a game object, scriptable object, or a scene, because I feel like a lot of problems that are like enemy related, or like storing a giant quick access lookup for prefabs for your enemies, for your attacks, for your whatever else. It's sort of nice to just be able to use an enum. Because you can use that for a lot of editor tooling, you can use it for a lot of like quick storage around the place, and it's generally easy to use an enum. But the difficulty is just making sure that it actually like having all your scriptable objects match correctly up in the correct order with your enum, especially if you then store that all the options in an array. Which is why you need some editor tooling to make sure that's the case.
Yeah, definitely.
Because the other way to do it is also you could what's it called? Instead of it being what's it called? Like the enum could also be the like a voice of authority, and then you only get to put in a new scriptable object / prefab game object if you have a new field in your enum, and then it generates like then you can use the source generator totally fine, because then it could generate a field on a game object that you could pass it into, or a field on a scriptable object that you could pass it into with no issue. I think the issue there is on most teams, what you would want is for the designer to be able to be the one that adds new enemies and attacks, etc. And therefore, you wouldn't want them to go in and change an enum.
Right. So. Yeah. So kind of getting back to this is again where things start to get a little bit messy. So if we look at each of the aliens on the enemy authoring, you have to manually set this enum to what it is for that particular alien. And then, so now if we get into kind of the game authoring portion of things, so like you were seeing here inside the Baker, doing the enemy prefabs resources.load all, looking at prefabs.enemies, type of game object. And I noticed, yes, we can't cast object array to a game object array. This, seemed to be, I was getting some weird error in the baking. So basically I have this object array resources.load all, and then in my get entity, then I'm casting this enemy prefab to a game object and then doing a get entity on it.
That makes sense.
So but so basically again, this is kind of like similar to this step that I'm doing here with the attack prefabs, where basically we're just kind of like creating that entity prefab instance, but not doing anything with it. And then actually down here, we're kind of looping through all the enemy prefabs Again, kind of doing something similar here. And then this time we're just kind of like looking at that enum value. If the enemy type is set to none, which is kind of the default uninitialized value, then it's just going to print out a warning to the screen. Otherwise, we'll do a triad. If that fails, then it'll print out an error. If there's basically duplicate types, if we say base alien red and then another prefab also has base alien red, then we'll get an error for that. So we do kind of get an error, but again, it still is a little bit messy where we have to manually assign the types and make sure we're not like adding duplicate ones. So
Yes.
Yeah. But then from there, then basically we can kind of use that entity type to do a lookup into this this dictionary that I have to spawn the entity prefabs. So yeah, and now enemies. This one is a little bit more. We're spawning more of the actually. I am doing a little bit of an optimization in the enemy spawning, in that any time that we essentially reach a new wave, I say, okay, what are all the enemy types that are part of this wave? Let me just get the prefab references, and then I store those in like a dynamic buffer, so that when I'm actually doing the tight loop logic of spawning X number of enemies every frame, then I have the prefab references immediately right there. So I'm not doing that constant lookup in the dictionary. That dictionary lookup is really just limited to any time that a new wave is reached, which is every 30 seconds or 1 minute or whatever.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
So I guess you kind of had already mentioned some things on what you think of that, but do you have any kind of other thoughts or comments on things as far as the how I'm doing this type of prefab management and enemy spawning?
No, I think the main part for me is just that I would have written a tool that makes sure to automatically create a prefab. Create a field in an enum per object that you have. I think as for the resources load call, I guess it's sort of nice just being able to have everything and be in a folder.
Right, because again, the other option is
together.
What I would have to do, what I'm doing with the attacks, where now I have to remember to every time I create a new enemy, now I have to drag that enemy into the
Yes.
game authoring there, and
I think from a performance point of view, we generally don't recommend doing it, but at the same time, you're actually doing something more performant than the classic way that resources load is being used, and you're probably not even aware of it, which is that generally the resources load, the reason it's slow is because you're what's it called, doing it at runtime. You're asking, hey, please load up this asset at runtime, and it will try to do it then and there when you call the load, and it will just stop the game in order to do that action, right? So generally speaking, we don't recommend it. There is an asynchronous call that you can use, and if you were to use resources load, please use the asynchronous version. However, it's not a big issue for you, because what you're doing is
you're bake time.
You're doing it at bake time, which means that you're doing it when the project is building,
Right.
and not when the actual game is being
Persons,
done.
yeah.
And I think actually using the resources load, at least in a baker, is technically supported, because there's not really a big reason that it shouldn't be. As long as you end up, which you are here, using one of the baking functions. So if you were planning on using any of the assets directly, so not actually turning it into an entity, in your case, you are using the get entity to turn it into an entity, and therefore it's part of the baking process, and you get back the entity, and so that's fine. If you wanted to use the object itself that you loaded from resources.load, what you should then do is you should use get dependency. and then pass in the object. And then I think it should still be fine. I think we will then make sure to register it in the asset bundle that is part of your subscene, and that should all be kosher. But it still means that you get around the problem of resources load, one of the main problems, at least as far as like
just kind of runtime performance. Yeah.
That's kind of interesting. Huh.
Just kind of how I'm using resources that load all in a baker like that, you mean?
Yeah. This is the first time that I've seen resources used at a baker.
Well, yeah, and actually, let me just see what if we cast this to a game object array. I just want to see what that exact error was, because there was something. Oh wait, do this game object. So yeah, there was no problem with this, but then when I go back over to Unity, we get this invalid cast exception. Specified cast is not valid, and so I'm getting that inside the baker, and then again that's on this line where I'm doing this resource does load all cast to the game object array.
I suppose it's because it can't actually guarantee that everything it got back was a game object.
Even though I'm passing in type of game object right here?
Yeah. I mean, there's at least as far as like C# is concerned, there's nothing guaranteed.
I'm pretty sure that this code is perfectly valid inside like a mono behavior.
Is that the case?
I'll check on my own and send you a message afterwards.
Yeah, please do, because I don't know. Like at least this is one of the weirder concept in like any language is the ability for you to take an array of a top type and turn it into an array of a subtype. Like casting arrays, especially in C#, is not really possible, generally speaking, unless you do I forget the word. There's some fancy word for it. But the general problem is of course what sort of can you actually guarantee that everything inside of the more specified version, like if you have an array of a top level class, does that actually can I safely cast that into a subtype? That is not necessarily guaranteed. Like it's something that you can do in a C language, a C style language, like what's it called, C++ or C or SIG or Odin, which is like to just unsafely cast from one type of array to another type. You may get garbage
data, but that's on you.
Yeah, exactly. And then like safety is thrown out the window, but now you can say that actually my array of instance IDs is just an array of entities. That's totally safe to do in C/C++. Well, not necessarily safe, but it's something that you're allowed by the language to do. In C#, you wouldn't be allowed to cast an int array over to a uint array, even though they are totally the same size. And in a similar fashion, there are some limitations on what you can cast one array type into another type when it comes to polymorphism. So I think that's might also be what you're entering there. Okay. There's funny ways to get around it. C# is actually more unsafe than you would expect. Like when you declare a struct, you can have a field on it called int. Well, a field on it that is an int array, and another field on it that is a uint array, and you can have a third field on it that is a ulong array, and then you can declare that struct a struct layout explicit. So you can use the attribute called struct layout, declare it as explicit, and then you can put all of those fields that you added as field offset 0, and that creates a union type. Now, you never use the unsafe keyword in any part of this, because those attributes are actually not part of the unsafe attributes-ness, which does also mean that now using this struct that you created, you can create a new int array, and then you can use the field that happens to overlap in memory as then saying dot ulong array. And the funny thing that happens there is if you have an array of 5 integers or 6 integers, what you would expect if it was a ulong array is you would expect there to now be 3 elements, because 6 ints is the same amount of memory as 3 ulongs. And like what actually happens is that the managed array will then tell you, no, there are 6 ulongs in this, and then it will just happily go outside the array of managed memory. Happily. I think actually in if you were to make a build of it, it will crash on you. But it's sort of weird, because it's without using the unsafe keyword, you can do something that is completely unsafe.
That's funny.
I would not recommend at all. Not that I know from experience or anything.
Isn't programming the best?
Yes.
Cool. Well, that's kind of some of the main things I wanted to talk to you about. There still was one other thing that I wanted to bring up, but we're running a little short on time here. I know you got to get rolling, so we'll probably talk about that the next time that you're on. It just can be kind of one of our random topics of discussion there. But yeah, we can kind of close things out here. So do you did you come up with something that you wanted to share with the people here today?
Sure. I mean, I'm sure I know we've mentioned it on the show. I don't know if we ever actually gave a link on the show. It's the good old presentation here. Why source access to dots is a game changer. You might remember this talk because it is a DV Rising talk from Unite 2022. And the reason that I'm showing this today is that I actually started playing V Rising as of yesterday.
Nice.
So it's the first time that I ever tried like actually playing the game. And I was like, oh, it's actually a really fun game. They have some really cool mechanics in it.
Yeah, they did a good job. Guys at Stunlock know a thing or two.
They definitely do. They definitely do, and especially this guy, Rasmus.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And of course, this presentation is pretty good at talking about the different things that they do that makes it special, especially good for their.
I forget this talk that exists sometimes, because I always remember the big Twitch stream that they did with Laurent a while ago, which is a really good one. And then I forgot that they did this Unite presentation.
It like talks about some of the things about entities, but it also talks about here like the because it's a giant map in the game. It's a really, really huge map, and they have like some fun challenges because, of course, all the trees are fully destructible, but you don't want them to always be loaded in as fully destructible, and so they have their own little baking system, and it also places all the trees correctly based on like gravity. So they have like nice offering tools that are all just like using baking and like running physics inside of baking, which is one of the points that they are making here about why having source access is such a game changer for dots, is because that's not something you would normally be able to do, is like change the use normal physX to do some editor tooling inside of Unity. Of course, people have gotten around it at this point. I'm pretty sure I've seen some editor asset tools that do actually use the Unity physics for that purpose, but I think they might just run the game in like a separate world and then scene and then upload it after. But this can just like run baking directly with physics. I can definitely recommend this talk. They go in depth on what makes it special, and the people presenting are really, really smart people. Sebastian Schöner, who I used to.
Oh yeah.
Actually, didn't we talk about him like 2 weeks ago? I'm pretty sure we did.
He's been doing a bunch of like blogs on crazy blogs and Twitter threads actually on like crazy in-depth Unity stuff that's like very, very technical.
Yes. and the other guy is Rasmus, who is like one of the leads for Stunlock. And I've met him like 3 times at this point. One time at Sweden Game Conference where I also met Tobias. Actually, it was Rasmus, Tobias, and I that did a panel talk together.
That's a powerful panel right there.
Yeah, a panel talk on dots and all the great and bad things about it.
I thought there wasn't anything wrong with dots.
I mean, what? Where's the sniper? So he's a really good guy. And he was also the one that gave me a V-Rising key to play the game.
And then you're finally playing it 2.5 years later.
Yeah. So I can recommend this talk.
Cool. Shout
it has
out.
a casual amount of 19,000 reviews.
Should be way more than that.
Yeah. I mean,
Still
similar to the
good,
Connecting the Dots talk, which has now 6.9.
Okay. All right. Climbing the ranks.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, check that out. We'll have a link to that down in the description of the video. All right. For my dynamic allocation, I wanted to share this YouTube channel, Scientia Ludos, which I
rose right out of the mouth.
Exactly. I did a translation on this. It is Latin for science game.
Oh, okay.
So the owner of this channel is someone. Do you happen to recognize this person at all?
I don't think I do. No.
His name is Gavin. He is the creator of a game called Choo Choo Charles. Does that name ring a bell at all?
That does ring a bell. I feel like.
This is
yeah. That's Choo Choo Charles, right? That game right there.
Choo Choo Charles. Yep.
No, that rings a bell.
So Gavin, he's a pretty young developer, but had this amazing hit called Choo Choo Charles, and then recently revealed his game Cuff Bust, which is kind of this one down here. And this one was super cool because it was actually revealed during Jeff Keighley's big Summer Games Fest. The game is solo created by him, and I think because he's kind of like a young guy and he had this one big hit. I think maybe some people might have the you almost might want to like dismiss him and say, oh, he just got lucky with this thing or whatever. But on this channel, he actually kind of goes into a lot of the methodology of how he kind of comes up with game ideas and kind of goes into some human psychology on things. And it's like actually a lot of the stuff that he did was like really smart and calculated. He's like a very thoughtful person. And so I would highly recommend this channel because he goes into a lot of like interesting game design and development topics that are kind of like push back against a lot of the kind of conventional wisdom that you might hear just kind of like going around on maybe different Reddit communities, or even just kind of some of the advice that you might hear from people on YouTube. So I think he does like a really interesting job about kind of like showing his take onto some things. And I think it's just a good channel overall. I've been kind of going through some of his videos over the past couple of days on this channel.
That looks really interesting. Also, going through all his videos seems very easy. Very he just started this like 3 weeks ago, and so he's been putting out one every couple days, and so it's still at the point where he doesn't have like 20 million videos on here, and it would take you forever. I mean, we have more episodes of the Hot Path Show than he.
Many more.
Exactly.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
So would recommend checking him out. And then of course his main channel is this 2-Star Games, where he has over 500,000 subscribers on. And this is his game Cuff Bust, this new one that's going to be coming out, and it's just a fun, silly little game there. I think that'll about do it for this episode of the Hot Path Show here. As we close things out, do just want to remind you that you can support us over on Patreon for some cool bonuses over there. And do just want to support our support or thank our supporters over at the CPU register tier. So thank you to eCool for your support over there. We really do appreciate that. And with that has been episode 42 of the Hot Path Show. Danny, any parting words from you here today?
Stay on the hot path.
Stay on the hot path. Keep on hot pathing on. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us here today. And we'll catch you next week with a new episode of the Hot Path Show. See ya.